After a disappointing season, we expect that Syracuse football is going to have a lot of turnover with its roster this offseason. But the good news is a lot of key players are coming back.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome in a Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer. Thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. And of course, we are always free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on today's show, we are going over the top returning players for Syracuse football for the 2026 season. Now, later on, we'll go over a couple of players who have not quite yet said publicly that they are coming back to Syracuse. We're going to go over defensive players that are coming back and offensive players that are coming back as well. All that and more coming up on this edition of Locked On Syracuse. And before we get to everything, this episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Now, before we begin, I want to state a quick correction from the last podcast. We were talking about Marcus Stokes out of West Florida and him being a potential candidate for Syracuse football. They certainly seem to have reported interest in him. And I mentioned on the podcast that he comes from an FCS level. That is not true. I apologize for making this mistake. West Florida football is actually Division II, which is a step below FCS. Doesn't really change my analysis all that much on Marcus Stokes, but I just wanted to point that out for you all, ladies and gentlemen, who tuned in to yesterday's episode when talking about quarterbacks that Syracuse could potentially target in the transfer portal. Now, having said that, let's get into this podcast, specifically the top returning players for Syracuse football. And the main thing about this show, the main theme, I should say, is despite a pretty terrible year, 3-9, getting blown out for the final 8 weeks of the season. We all know what happened. We don't need to go through everything again. Most of the key players who we would really want to come back have already announced their intention to come back. Now, keep in mind that intentions can obviously change. Something can happen between now, December 9th, and when the portal opens in early January. But the good news is, at least for now, most of these players that we're about to talk about have already said that they are coming back. And let's start with the offense for Syracuse football, some of the key players. Steve Angeli, starting quarterback for Syracuse the first 4 games of the 2025 season. He was leading the nation in passing before he ultimately suffered that torn Achilles rolling to his right in the Clemson game. If healthy, Steve Angeli will most likely be the starting quarterback in 2026. We know that Syracuse is in the quarterback market. We don't know exactly what type of quarterback that they are searching for in the portal. We also know that they're looking to get multiple guys out of the portal. But Steve Angeli, if healthy, he will most likely be the starting quarterback for next season. And on top of that, because he got so hurt early in the 2025 season, he will most likely, if it's not confirmed already, get a medical redshirt year, meaning Steve Angeli could have eligibility for the 2027 season as well. So he could be a multi-year starter for Syracuse, and we don't completely miss out on Steve Angeli's 2025 year because you get it in 2027. So that's the good news for Syracuse football. Steve Angeli has already announced his intention to come back to the team. You got the running back duo that have both said that they are coming back to Syracuse, Yasin Willis and Will Nixon. Let's start with Yasin Willis, who ran for 558 yards on 4.3 yards per carry in 9 games. I like Yasin Willis. He's a big, bruising running back. And then you have Will Nixon, who is trying for an additional year of eligibility, which actually caught Fran Brown off guard when the news broke about it happening. But he does want to return to Syracuse, so we'll see if that actually happens. The way I view the running back room for Syracuse in 2026 as presently constructed with Yasin, Willis, and potentially Will Nixon back in the fold for the Orange, I think it could use an upgrade, but it's not at the top of the list. And we'll go over in a future podcast the big transfer portal needs for Syracuse. Running back is not at the top. It could use an upgrade. I would love to upgrade on Will Nixon. I'm not going to lie to you all, ladies and gentlemen. But if you're telling me that, hey, we need to worry about XYZ first, and then we can get to running back. And if we don't get to running back, then it's just going to be Willis and Nixon next year. I won't be too upset. I think that every position group could use an upgrade. Running back, less so than some of the others on this roster right now. Byron Washington, a true freshman offensive lineman from this past season. He played in 9 games. I do think he will have a starting spot for next year. It's not a guarantee. He's going to have a good spring and a good fall camp, but he did show some promise in his true freshman season as an offensive lineman. And we especially know with offensive linemen, it can take a lot of time to develop from high school to college. So it's a good young building block for Syracuse to have along the offensive line. And I mentioned in the postgame show after BC that he should be a priority for Syracuse. And good thing is he's already announced his intention to come back. The rest of the offensive line we'll get to later on in the show, but it's TBD. Trevion Mack, Cam Pringle, and Joe Cruz, they all have eligibility. Fran Brown did seem to indicate that those guys will return to Syracuse, but since I have not seen a report saying that all 3 have announced that they're coming back, I'm labeling it as TBD for now. Finally, you got Darrell Gill. He'll be a senior wide receiver next year. Last season, he caught 32 passes for over 500 yards and 5 touchdowns. A lot of us, including myself, were hoping that 2025 was going to be a big breakout season for Darrell Gill because he certainly flashed in 2024 as, if I recall correctly, the 5th or 6th option on the team. I mean, they had a lot of weapons in 2024, and Darrell Gill was someone who was still able to carve out a pretty decent role, getting over 500 yards and leading the nation, or leading the ACC in yards per catch in 2024. But based on his numbers and his overall production, that jump didn't necessarily occur. I wouldn't say that Darrell Gill had a bad year for Syracuse football. I'm certainly happy that he is returning. We just didn't see that jump. And the more that I think about it, with Gill and any other wide receiver on the team this year, a lot of it had to do with quarterback play. You got Ricky Collins throwing you the ball, it's hard to produce. You got Joe Filardi throwing you the ball, it's hard to produce. Those guys could barely complete a forward pass. So I think, honestly, it's pretty impressive that he was able to carve out 500 yards a year ago. And when you consider what's in the pipeline for Syracuse and what's to come, Darrell Gill could have a better 2026 season. You got Calvin Russell, 5-star wide receiver out of high school coming in. Amare Gough is a 4-star wide receiver. We would be talking a lot more about Amare Gough if not for Calvin Russell. But keep in mind, he's also a 4-star wide receiver. He's got a ton of talent, and he could carve out a role immediately for Syracuse. And you also got Steve Angeli, hopefully back and healthy, or at least someone behind him that is more capable than Ricky Collins and Joe Filardi. So things should open up a little bit more for Darrell Gill next season, and I do expect that he is going to have a better year in 2026 than 2025, but this big breakout year happening where he might go over 1,000 yards, while it would be amazing, I don't necessarily see that happening for him in 2026. Still a useful player for the Orange to keep. Who else would you like Syracuse to keep for the 2026 season on offense that have not already announced their intention that they are coming back? Comment your thoughts right now in the comments section below. Now, coming up, we'll go over the defense for Syracuse and some of the top players that are coming back. So stick with me here on Locked On Syracuse. The holidays come with 2 big goals: feeding people well and finding gifts they'll actually love. And when you want both handled in one move, Omaha Steaks is the way to go. From hosting to gifting, they deliver the world's best steak experience right to your door, because during their Sizzle All the Way sale, you can stock up and save in a huge way. 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com, and it gets even better. Locked On College listeners get an extra $35 off with code COLLEGE at checkout. So many options: fillets, burgers, comfort meals, sides, desserts. You can build a box for anyone. Save big on gourmet gifts and more holiday favorites with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide during their Sizzle All the Way sale. And for an extra $35 off, use promo code COLLEGE at checkout. Terms apply. See site for details. That's omahasteaks.com, code COLLEGE. Locked On Syracuse, I'm Jackson Holzer. We're talking about the top returning players for Syracuse football for 2026. And before we continue with the defense, shout out to my everydayers here on Locked On Syracuse. And hey, maybe this is your first episode of Locked On Syracuse here in the Syracuse football offseason. If you haven't done so already, please feel free, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It helps the channel grow to reach all Syracuse Orange fans. Let's cut to the chase about this defense. The big three players that you would most likely want to return for Syracuse have already announced their intentions of coming back to Syracuse. And that is excellent news. The big three: Antoine Deslauriers, Demetres Samuel, and Chris Peal. Let's go through all of them individually. Antoine Deslauriers, he's going to be a true sophomore inside linebacker next season, recently named by On3 as a true freshman All-American. He had 60 tackles, 2.5 sacks, and also he had that forced fumble in the Clemson game, which was unfortunately Syracuse's final victory of the season. But that was a big-time play that Antoine Deslauriers made. And also, if I recall correctly, in that Clemson game, he also had a big fourth down stop in that game on Adam Randall. I think that new defensive coordinator, Vince Terrace, is going to like having this young stud middle linebacker patrolling the defense for him this upcoming season. He already had a really good true freshman year, and I expect that he is going to be even better for Syracuse in his true sophomore season. So big that they're getting Antoine Deslauriers back. Demetres Samuel, he was Syracuse's highest rated prospect in the 2025 class. He will be a true sophomore corner next season for this team. He had 45 tackles, 9 passes defended, and 1 interception, which I believe came against Colgate. He's technically someone that can play both ways. We did see at times him get on the field on offense, but for the most part, he is a defense player first, and it's not particularly close. He had 2 plays from scrimmage a year ago for 11 total yards. It was like 1 carry for 1 yard, 1 catch for 10 yards. At times, when he is playing corner, he can get a little bit handsy, and I pointed that out in the post-game of the Boston College debacle, where he had a couple of instances where he committed a pass interference down the field where he simply was not playing the ball, where if he had played the ball, he might have ended up with an interception, or at very least, it would have just been an incompletion. But instead, he commits a pass interference penalty. But guess what? I'm being a little bit nitpicky here. He was a true freshman. He was 17 years old in 2025. Now he is going to be a year older for the 2026 season. And I think with a little bit more coaching and a little bit more development, Demetres Samuel could be an all-conference corner for Syracuse as soon as this upcoming season. So that is a big, young building block to get back for this team. Chris Peal, a Georgia transfer corner from this past offseason. He will be a redshirt junior this upcoming year, so he's got a couple of more years of eligibility. 47 tackles, 7 passes defended, and no interceptions. I think overall, having Samuel and Peal coming back for Syracuse is so big for this cornerback room, because now corner is not something that I'm really looking at too heavily in the portal. And we know that cornerback is a premium position on the market. I don't need to sit here and lecture you all how important cornerback play is, regardless of the level of football. It's pretty important. Having Samuel and Peal, 2 quality corners, coming back for Syracuse next year, I think is great for the team. Now, could they use another veteran corner potentially from the portal? Of course. I think that every position group on the team could use an upgrade. But if you're telling me next year the starting corners are once again going to be Samuel and Peal, at least for right now in early December, I'm not mad about that idea. But maybe you feel differently. Maybe you feel that corner is a much stronger need for Syracuse. So feel free to comment your thoughts right now in the comment section below. And finally, this is a very interesting player that we're about to talk about. Jamie Tremble. Jamie Tremble was someone who a year ago around this time, a lot of us thought that he was going to be the Oronde Gadsden replacement. Oronde Gadsden left for the NFL. Good for him. He's having a very nice rookie year with the Chargers, although he didn't do much the last couple of weeks, and now he's hurting me on my dynasty team because he became my starting tight end with Sam Laporta out. That's another story for another day. So Oronde's got to get better in fantasy, but overall he's having a good rookie year. I digress. Jamie Tremble at Syracuse was supposed to be the replacement. He was a 4-star tight end in the 2024 recruiting cycle. But keep in mind, even though he was a 4-star tight end, in high school, he did play some linebacker. And so Syracuse and Fran Brown decided for this season that they were going to use Jamie Tremble more on defense than on offense. And they essentially turned him into a linebacker. With Jamie Tremble, he had 3 sacks in 2025, and he is still very young. He is going to be a redshirt sophomore this upcoming season. He is a freak athlete. He's 6'4", 220 pounds. He's got good speed. I think with the right coaching, and obviously it falls on Jamie Tremble as well to, have that work ethic and overall just the talent in general to be able to succeed. So it's not all on coaching. He's got a lot of promise. He's got potential to potentially be an NFL player on defense, given his tools at his disposal. It's all about whether or not he's going to be able to piece it all together. So I like Jamie Tremble as someone who is coming back next year as a boomer bust type of player. Like if you told me that Jamie Tremble next year is going to lead Syracuse with, 8 or 9 sacks, I would not be all that surprised. If you told me that Jamie Tremble next year is going to come back and barely carve out a role on defense, I would also not be all that surprised. So that's a way of me saying I like that he is returning to Syracuse. I think he is someone that they can definitely develop into a very high quality player, but it should not preclude Syracuse in the portal looking for players that can come off the edge and create havoc. Comment your thoughts right now in the comment section below. Same question I left off with in the previous segment, offense players. What players on defense would you like to see come back to this team that have not already announced their intention to come back? Comment your thoughts right now in the comment section below. Now coming up, the top 2 undecided players for Syracuse. Are these guys coming back? Are they not coming back? We'll talk about it next on Locked On Syracuse. The World Cup is coming back to North America, and for the first time since 1994, and with 48 teams for the first time ever, it's going to be massive. But let's be honest, actually getting tickets is the hardest part usually. That's why the Game Time app is clutch, finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Game Time, you could track price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. And the prices, they include the fees up front, which I love. There are no last-second surprises at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets in every match, concert, or event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, make an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Game Time. Is Johntay Cook coming back to Syracuse? It's a question that I've gotten multiple times here on this show. And so now I think is a good time that we talk about it, because the short answer is we don't know if Johntay Cook is going to return to Syracuse. He was a receiver that was brought in from Texas and Washington last offseason, a former 5-star recruit in the 2023 recruiting cycle. So we knew he had a ton of talent, and he's actually going to be entering his senior year, his final year of college eligibility. Last year, he had 45 catches, about 550 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Like Darrell Gill, who we talked about earlier in the show, we were hoping that we were going to get more production out of Johntay Cook, but I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that Syracuse had really poor quarterback play, and they didn't really have anyone that could get him the football aside from Steve Angeli, who got hurt after the first 4 weeks of the season. So here is the deal with Johntay Cook. I like him, and I want him back on the team next season. So don't get me wrong. Don't get it twisted. Johntay Cook, I think, showcased that he's got a lot of talent, and he could be a very useful player for Syracuse. He could be a starting wide receiver once again for Syracuse in 2026. Of course, I would like him back. But I think a lot of it is going to come down to, A, his appetite of whether or not he wants to come back, and B, what's the price? How much is it going to cost to bring back Johntay Cook? And in my opinion, Syracuse needs to set a hard line in the sand of how far they are willing to go to keep Johntay Cook. And it's not necessarily just about Johntay Cook. It's about the position group that he is in, which is wide receiver. Darrell Gill has already announced that he's coming back. Calvin Russell, a 5-star recruit, has already signed to come play for Syracuse for 2026. Amare Gough is a 4-star as well that is signed to play in 2026. And we know that Syracuse has some other receivers like Darian Williams and Jalen Hornsby that are in the pipeline as well. But if you're telling me choose between those guys and Johntay Cook, I'm probably taking Johntay Cook. Bottom line is that this receiver room, it seems like already, even without Johntay Cook, it does have talent there. It could be a position of strength for Syracuse in 2026, just on face value. They'll probably need to add another wide receiver in the portal regardless. But with Johntay Cook specifically, it's going to come down to the price and whether or not he wants to even return to Syracuse. He may not. He may say after this season that it wasn't a good year and decide to go. Or Syracuse says, look, we want you back. I know you want to come back, but we only have X amount of dollars that are allocated to you, and you might be able to get more on the open market. So those are my thoughts on Johntay Cook. I want him back. He is a very good player, and I think he has more to give than what we saw last season because of how bad the quarterback play was. But given the strength of this wide receiver room already, and given that Syracuse has a ton of other needs elsewhere, they can't be spending too much of their budget to try to keep Johntay Cook. So is he coming back? We're not sure. It's very much up in the air with him. The other player that I want to discuss is Gary Bryant. Gary Bryant, it seems like he will come back to Syracuse. I was listening to an interview from a few weeks ago, but there hasn't really been much about Gary Bryant since that interview. He was a South Dakota transfer that was brought in from this past offseason, and he had 60 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, playing right alongside Antoine Deslauriers. He does have another year of eligibility remaining. If Bryant does officially announce that he is coming back to the team, cool. He's a useful player to have. If he decides to ultimately enter the transfer portal, and again, I don't think he will, but if he does decide to go to the portal, I'm not going to lose sleep over it. He's useful, but you can upgrade on him. Now, as far as everyone else is concerned, we already talked about the offensive line earlier with Trevion Mack, Cam Pringle, Joe Cruz. We don't know if those guys officially are coming back, even though Fran Brown did say or did indicate that those guys could be coming back. Bottom line is that none of those guys should be guaranteed starting jobs next year. We'll go over the offensive line and how much they need it in a future podcast. And that message of not guaranteeing starting jobs to too many players, That applies to pretty much everyone on Syracuse's roster, aside from like maybe 5 to 6 guys. I think Demetres Samuel is a starter. Chris Peal is a starter. Antoine Deslauriers is a starter. Steve Angeli is a starter. And then we'll see with Yasin, Willis, and Byron Washington, but those guys will probably be starters next year for Syracuse as well. Everyone else, they got to earn it. Because this team last year, it went 3-9. And in the final 8 games of the year, they got outscored by an average of 27.5 points. So we got to be open-minded to change. This team does need a real talent influx this offseason, and not just at quarterback, it's at pretty much every position group on the field. But circling back to the very top of the show, the players that have already announced their intention to come back are the players that we most want to come back to Syracuse. That's a good thing. They have a solid young base that is already there. And now it's time for Syracuse to go attack the transfer portal hard this offseason, get some more talent on this team. Comment your thoughts right now in the comments section below. And hey, we can maybe do a future podcast on this. So comment right now some breakout players for Syracuse currently on the roster for 2026. Someone that I'm not talking about right now. Comment in the comment section below. Now, as far as what's coming up in the near future here on Locked On Syracuse, tomorrow, I decided to shift some things around, okay? We're going to have the top players Syracuse is going to lose via eligibility because we have not done that yet. On Thursday, Syracuse is playing St. Joseph's in men's basketball. That's at 9 p.m. Eastern. We will have a full post-game reaction show to that. And then on Friday, this was originally going to be on Wednesday, but now I'm moving it to Friday. Syracuse football transfer portal needs. That's going to be fun. So all that and more coming up on Locked On Syracuse in the near future. Folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this podcast, be sure to hit that like button. If you really enjoy the podcast, be sure to hit subscribe. Tell all your friends about Locked On Syracuse, and I will see you all again soon.